Right, so you're a software developer and you're kind of curious about AI,
Okay.
right? Like, you actually using JavaScript for that. We're going to dive deep into this Dice.com article. It's by Jeff Cogswell. He really breaks down whether JavaScript can hang with the AI big leagues.
Yeah, the article kind of jumps right in. It's like, yes, you can totally use JavaScript for AI, but it makes a really important point right off the bat. It's not just like write some code and boom, you've got AI. It matters where that code is running.
So it's different if I'm doing it in like a web browser versus using something like Node.js on a server.
Exactly. Like that's a huge distinction for AI. See, a lot of AI stuff, especially if you're training models, it needs a ton of power.
Hmm.
And that usually means you got to have a GPU.
Right, right.
Now, browsers, they can access the GPU, but it's limited, right? Think about it. I'm sure you've seen it before.
Right, yeah.
Your browser just starts chugging when there's a website with some crazy graphics or something.
Oh, totally.
That's using WebGL, which, yeah, it taps into the GPU, but it's not really meant for the heavy lifting AI needs.
Okay, so if I'm dreaming of like building some super advanced AI that runs right there in the user's browser, maybe I need to scale back my expectations.
Well, maybe not abandon the dream, but definitely you got to be aware of what you're working with. Like WebGL has limits, right? There's
Yeah.
this newer thing, WebGPU, which is promising.
I've heard of that.
It lets you access the GPU more directly, but it's still like early days. Not every browser fully supports it yet.
Gotcha. So as developers, we got to keep up with that, see what's actually feasible.
For sure. And this article, it's good because it doesn't just point out problems. It gives you 4 key things to think about when you're doing AI in the browser.
Well, that's useful. What are they?
All right, so first up, like we were just saying, there's the limitations of WebGL and the fact that WebGPU is kind of the new kid on the block still. Second, browsers have memory limits,
Oh, right. Yeah.
especially if you're messing with these huge, large language models, the LLMs everyone's buzzing about. Imagine trying to load a massive data set into your browser. It's going to freak out.
Uh-huh. Yeah, my laptop fan would be screaming.
Exactly. And then the third thing is you got to get real clever with how you coordinate stuff if you're splitting the AI workload between the front end and the back end.
So like some parts running in the browser, some parts on the server.
Yeah, it's doable, but it adds a whole other layer of complexity to your project.
Right.
And then finally, the article says, even if you're not building AI models from scratch, which, let's be real, most of us aren't, you've
Right.
got to at least understand how they work.
Makes sense. Like, I don't need to build a car engine to drive, but knowing a bit about how they work makes me a better driver.
Perfect analogy. In the AI world, most devs are going to be using pre-trained models, not building new ones. But understanding what those models do, that's key. Especially with LLMs, those things can do some pretty wild stuff.
Okay, so the article mentions LLMs a lot. It actually explains them pretty well, even if you're not an AI expert already.
Yeah, well, they're a big deal right now.
But like, why? Why all the hype?
Well, LLMs are a type of AI that uses this thing called natural language processing, or NLP.
NLP, got it.
It's how AI understands and generates, like, human language.
Mm.
And we've had NLP for a while, but then in 2017, these things called transformers came along.
Transformers? Like,
Thank-
never mind. AI transformers.
Yeah, not the robots. But they did kind of transform everything. This new architecture, it blew the roof off what NLP could do. And it paved the way for generative AI, which is the kind that can write text that sounds like shockingly human. That's what LLMs are all about.
So for us developers, knowing how to USE these LLMs is going to be a valuable skill.
Absolutely. You got to know which model is right for the job, how to fit it into your app, all that. And luckily, there are some awesome JavaScript libraries that make it way easier than you might think.
Cool, good. That's what I was hoping to hear. So the article gets into the specific tools, and it seems like TensorFlow.js is the big name right now. Why is that one so popular?
Well, it makes sense. TensorFlow itself is like a giant in the AI world, especially for folks who work with Python. Having a JavaScript version means we can tap into that power. We can even use existing Python code if we need to, which is super handy.
And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Remember how we were talking about the limits of running AI in the browser? Well, TensorFlow.js isn't stuck there.
Oh, yeah.
It can actually use CUDA. So if you're running it on a server, it can run on NVIDIA GPUs.
See, that's what I love about JavaScript. It's so versatile. You can use it for browser stuff, but if you need more muscle, you can go server side. Gives developers options.
Totally. And the article doesn't just stop with TensorFlow.js. It also mentions this other one, ML5.js. What's the deal with that?
So ML5.js, it's actually built on top of TensorFlow.js, but it's like they took it and made it more approachable, especially for people who are new to AI.
Oh, cool. So it's like the beginner-friendly version.
Kinda, yeah. It streamlines a lot of the complexity. Great starting point if you're just dipping your toes in.
Gotcha. But it's mainly for browser stuff, right?
Yeah, primarily browser focused. And then we've got another interesting one, Transformers.js. This one comes from Hugging Face.
Oh, I've heard of them. They seem to be like the cool kids of the LLM world, always pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, they're definitely on the cutting edge. And their JavaScript library is pretty cool. It's mainly for the browser too, but it can also work with Node.js. So if you want to play around with those super advanced LLMs, this is one to watch.
So much to explore.
Yeah.
And the article even digs up some lesser-known libraries like LLM.js and WebML. It's like a whole treasure hunt of AI tools.
It is. But with those smaller libraries, you got to remember the communities might be smaller too. So there might be less support if you run into problems. It's that trade-off, you know? Experimenting with something new versus having that big safety net of a huge community.
True, true. But sometimes that experimentation is half the fun. All right, so we've been talking a lot about browser-based AI, but let's not forget the server side. We mentioned Node.js earlier. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, remember how we said TensorFlow.js can use CUDA on those NVIDIA GPUs when it's running on a server?
Yeah.
That opens up a ton of possibilities for those heavier AI tasks, the ones that need serious computing power. Plus, Transformers.js, remember, it can also work with Node.js for backend stuff.
So basically, with JavaScript and AI, we're not limited to just the browser. We can actually use it on both the front end and the back end.
Bingo. And that leads to a really cool idea. A hybrid approach. Imagine this. You handle those complex AI tasks on a powerful backend using Node.js, and then you build this sleek, interactive front end for your web app using, you guessed it, JavaScript.
Best of both worlds, right?
Totally. You get the power where you need it and a smooth user experience that JavaScript is known for. And just so everyone knows, you don't have to stick with JavaScript for the backend if something else, like Python, is better for your project.
So it's all about picking the right tool for the job, not just being a JavaScript fanatic.
Exactly. The point is, JavaScript gives you options. Browser-based AI, server-side AI, or this hybrid approach. It's all there.
So it's really cool to see how JavaScript is kind of breaking out of that box, right?
Yeah.
It's not just for making websites interactive anymore. It can actually be a real tool for building AI stuff.
For sure. And one thing that really stood out to me from this article is how much it stresses understanding the concepts behind AI. Like, even if you're not the one building the models from scratch,
Yeah.
you got to know how to pick the right one, how to make it work with your project, how to deal with problems that pop up. It's important stuff.
It's kind of like, you have a toolbox full of power tools.
Mhm.
You don't need to be the one who built the tools, but you better know which one to use for what and how to use it safely.
Exactly. And with AI, things are changing so fast. Keeping up with the tools is more important than ever. We've talked about TensorFlow.js, ML5.js, Transformers.js, but those are just like the beginning. There's a whole world of JavaScript AI stuff out there.
So this article is kind of like our map, guiding us through this whole new world.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the excitement. It's also about knowing where the cliffs are, right?
Right. The article does a good job of pointing those out. Like, remember the limitations with browser-based AI and how important it is to choose the right approach for your project. Browser server, that hybrid thing we talked about, gotta know the trade-offs.
So for all the devs listening, let's boil this down. If you're thinking about JavaScript and AI, what are the key takeaways?
Okay. Takeaway number one, don't underestimate JavaScript. It might not be the obvious choice for AI, but it's way more flexible and powerful than people give it credit for. Especially when you consider that hybrid approach combining the power of Node.js on the server with the user-friendliness of JavaScript in the browser, that opens up so many possibilities.
Yeah, I love that. We're finally showing the world that JavaScript can be a serious player in the AI game.
Exactly. Okay, takeaway number two is knowing the limitations. Like, running AI in the browser has its downsides, right? But like we said, there are workarounds. And then you've got Node.js on the server, which can handle more, but might need some different skills.
So we need to be smart about picking the right tool for the job. But wouldn't it be easier to just use JavaScript for the whole project, front end, A and D, back end? When does it actually make sense to bring in other languages?
That's a good question. Using one language can definitely simplify things, but sometimes the best tool for the backend AI might be something else, like Python. Python's got a ton of AI libraries, you know? So it comes down to balance consistency versus the best tools. Sometimes that means using more than one language.
So it's about being practical, not just a JavaScript diehard.
Yeah. And that brings us to takeaway number 3, which is get to know those libraries and tools. TensorFlow.js, ML5.js, Transformers.js, those are just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole world of JavaScript AI stuff out there to explore.
Like a playground for curious devs. What excites you the most about these tools?
Honestly, it's the potential. We can build apps that learn, that interact with people in totally new ways. Natural language processing, image recognition, things we haven't even thought of yet. The possibilities are huge.
I can't wait to see what people create.
Yeah.
And the article really emphasizes that, right? Don't be afraid to
For
experiment.
sure. The JavaScript AI world is changing so fast. Staying curious and trying new things is the only way to keep up.
Gotta love that constant learning, right?
Yeah.
Now, after all this talk about JavaScript and AI, what's the biggest takeaway for you? What really stuck with you from this article?
It's funny. For me, it really IS that hybrid approach we keep talking about, like
Yeah.
combining the power of Node.js on the server, with that smooth JavaScript experience on the front end. That's where the magic happens.
It feels like the most, I don't know, realistic way to do AI with JavaScript.
Right.
You get the heavy lifting done where it needs to be done, but the user still gets that nice interactive web experience.
Exactly. And for all those developers out there listening, thinking about diving into this stuff, I kind of want to leave them with a question.
Oh, good one.
So think about everything we've talked about, all the tools, the possibilities. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for using JavaScript and AI together in your own work?
That's a great question to think about. I mean, is it going to be making user interfaces smarter? Building whole new apps that do crazy AI things? Or something we haven't even thought of yet? Who knows?
And for everyone who's ready to get started, don't forget to check out the show notes. We've got links to everything we mentioned, including that Dice.com article by Jeff Cogswell. It's a great place to start if you're serious about JavaScript and AI.
Awesome. Well, that about wraps it up for this deep dive. Until next time, keep coding, keep learning, and most importantly, keep exploring this amazing world of AI with JavaScript.